This is going to be a short video that I'll expand upon when the game releases, but I have to say, it's your fault that Jean Grey is an ugly 50-year-old woman. Not everyone, but the decently large percentage of shills and cope gamers that defended PS5 Farquaad face MJ by saying she looked normal or fine, or others that have downplayed the severity of her ugliness with quotes like, "Oh, you don't know how a woman looks like," even though none of the many people I've talked to can name off a healthy woman in her 20s that looks as questionable, aside from the self-insert lady who isn't the lady they hired. Not to mention that a woman of her face is probably a rarity. But anyway, I'm starting to yap on the subject I've already nailed before. But the point is, the amount of people that let that slide probably encouraged the extremely lowered standard of feminine beauty, and now we have a granny Jean Grey. Other than Fable, I couldn't name off a healthy gaming 20s lady face that looked worse than PS5 MJ. But now Insomniac comes in to beat their own shitty record.
Oh, that's a big boy, isn't he?
Of course, there's the fact that these images are leaks and the models aren't done, but I'm not going to let these dumb Insomniac cope drones use that as an excuse when the end product will likely look as bad as the leak does. It'll just get more HD so you can see every single wrinkle. Wolverine doesn't look as severely ugly in this lowered resolution, so that already proves enough. The leaked files apparently show off a Jean Grey that looked prettier only for them to swap it out for an uglier one, due to sweet baby ink interference as I've heard. I don't want to blame that company for everything though, as there's more factors at play, as Resican and I delved into in our last video. And I was sorta onto Insomniac ever since their first game anyway. MJ didn't look as horrible there, but I don't think anyone can name an MJ she's prettier than. She could have looked better based on the actress, but it only got worse. But speaking of lower resolutions and faces, it's crazy how these older games have prettier, more practical faces for these women than these shitshow games despite the lower resolution. Beyond the Mary Jane examples I provided with Web of Shadows, there's Jean Grey from Marvel vs. Capcom who looks amazing and stunning, or her appearance in the Ultimate Alliance 2 game, where she doesn't look ugly as well. The PS3, PS2 era was so much better for superheroes. No gay side mission that mocks the religious beliefs of Puerto Rico, just fun Spidey games with faster swinging speeds than a PS5 game, and a fun 4-player co-op heavy hitter like Ultimate Alliance and the X-Men games. The new Wolverine game is probably going to be another scenario being inferior to his past movie license game. It's a real shame they delisted most of those older Marvel games that don't have pride flags, but at this point, it's probably a deliberate decision since Marvel, Sony, and Insomniac doesn't want their inferiorities to be shown off by old games running on a modern console. They don't want people playing the original Spider-Man 2 or Web of Shadows and realizing that the swinging speed is faster than their PS5 game. They don't want them seeing PS3 Mary Janes and Jean Greys that have prettier, more practical faces that you're more likely to see in person, as opposed to Ogre Jane and graying hair Jean Grey. Like, I honestly thought Wolverine would be handled better than Spider-Man because he's a harder character to emasculate, but I have a feeling they'll find a way. Maybe they'll pin him under a fridge made out of styrofoam. Making Jean Grey playable will be less laughable than those shitty MJ segments because Jean Grey is a skilled person with powers as opposed to Rambo Jane that goes from journalist to Lara Croft Rambo with very minimal setup. No more than a month of Silver Sable training as justification for her taking out a dozen of people trained by Craven for assumably years. But whatever, the cuck dev said he didn't give a shit about his shitty writing, so why should anyone else give a shit about this story, written for dummies and shills? The point still stands that someone may just want to play as Wolverine though. Like, even characters like Sabretooth would be a better choice, or Deathstrike if you want the woman points, as those characters can offer something different without deviating from the core gameplay too much. Similar to how Bat Family members work in an actual good superhero game. If Insomniac made a poll on an additional character that people wanted added to this Wolverine game, Sabretooth would probably win the poll. Deathstrike may be second, and then there's Jean Grey, who I think would probably be last when it comes to a Wolverine game, where I would think people would want slashing to be consistent as opposed to Jean Grey, who probably won't rip people apart with her telepathy. To be honest, Insomniac has always handled playable characters like shit by deciding to go with Mary Jane over Black Cat, who they could have broke new grounds with by having it be her first time being playable in a Spider-Man game apart from her appearance in Friend or Foe. Hell, even a trained cop like Wraith or a gadget whiz like Tinker would have made a less laughable playable character than MJ. They chose the worst woman they could choose for gameplay. Go play Web of Shadows if you want MJ to fuck shit up in a less laughable manner as Spider-Man backs her up, as opposed to Insomniac where we get Mary Jane for around an hour of 1v-dozening symbiotes and hunters, while Venom only gets 20 minutes and no replayable challenge mode, like an actual good superhero game has. Even the Amazing Spider-Man has this going for it. Look at this list of playable characters from older Spidey games. Insomniac, you're trash! I'm spitting facts, but dang, I'm yapping again. But the point is, all these underwhelming things we get in gaming is because people let companies get away with it. And I think Jean Grey getting uglier than what was already an ugly face is a pretty big example of that. You have to speak with your wallet, especially if you're not a YouTuber using it for content. The only way I'll buy that Wolverine game is for YouTube coverage, and even then, I might not. I don't want to support the bastardization of faces that don't look like their actress when the women I've dated look like a supermodel in comparison to these pieces of shit that only some ugly, balding, low-standard incel could be content with. Retirement home dating standards. Nobody who defends these faces gets any play. When you see a couple posting a photo on Instagram, the 20-year-old woman doesn't look that dog shit. Viewers, I beg you to obtain your own evidence by checking your Instagram and checking out how the 20s women you know look like. Or better yet, go outside for similar results. Most women at a Starbucks will look better unless they're just fat. There's just too many ways to prove this point. Every live-action Spider-Man love interest looks better than both of those photorealistic Insomniac Mary Janes. If a Spider-Man movie released with a casting of a love interest that somehow looked as bad as that MJ face, the movie would likely bomb or have a drastic dip. Which I guess goes to show that gamers can be complacent morons, but whatever, you cucks can proceed to argue with real-life faces if you want. Hell, even the woman causing these problems at Sweet Baby Inc. looks way better than the faces in these overrated games. Sure, some games have the ladies be too pretty, but even those women are more of a probability than whatever the hell these faces are, so long as you're not counting the ridiculous anime shit you see from time to time. These games are way too expensive to be pulling that ugly shit, such as Star Wars Outlaws that I'm skipping due to the face downgrade in tandem with the ridiculous price for a single player game. I've had enough of this shit. But anyway, that's about it for this video. Check out these two videos that expand on topics delved into here, and check out the Discord server. Thanks for watching.